Welcome to episode 69 of The Route, presented by Jobs in Sports. The Route is a glorified sports business coffee chat that has a new guest every episode as they share their experiences and route in sports. I'm Christopher Nascimento, and let's get started. So, on today's podcast episode, we have a pretty cool guest, another person in the hockey space. But before we get to their route, two things to cover as usual. First off, if you haven't already, follow the podcast on Apple, Spotify, etc., whatever you listen on. We're on all those. And we're also on YouTube now, especially with this video if you're watching it. So subscribe to our YouTube channel at White Whale Marketing. And additionally, follow us on social media at The Route Sports. But with that said, let's get to today's guest. So today's guest is Kevin Tansey, and let's just do a quick introduction. So I'd now like to welcome someone who's still playing professional hockey while also being a chief brand officer at ImpACTIVE Cannabis. Kevin Tansey, welcome to the route. How's it going?
It's going pretty good. Thanks for having me. I'm excited.
For sure. Yeah, no, thanks for coming on this morning. So the way I kind of enjoy, let's say, beginning every episode with a guest is just take us through your route. So where did it begin and how did we get here today?
All right. So my routes had some pretty crazy twists and turns, I guess you could say. It started off, I was sort of the first athlete in my family. My dad and my brother played hockey and, sports growing up, but nothing at too high of a competitive level. I went the same route as most guys who play professional hockey these days. Started off in AAA. Ended up getting drafted to the Ottawa Junior A League, played for the Cumberland Grads for 2 seasons. And then from there, I was offered a scholarship to Clarkson University. Obviously, I was excited about that. I knew that schooling was important. I wanted a backup plan just in case, obviously something didn't work out, you get injured or something. But so I went to Clarkson. I spent 5 years there. I redshirted 1 year because of injury. And after that, I became a pro hockey player. I started off in the American League, jumped between the ECHL and the American League. And now I'm overseas. I'm going into my 6th year pro and 3rd year in Europe. I'll be playing in Slovakia this year for the Košice team. And I'm excited to get over there for sure. It was definitely a stressful year last year, having not too many fans in the stands. I don't think I played a single game in front of fans last year, so that was a little bit tough. But next year we're gonna have fans again, so excited to get back into it for sure.
Yeah, for sure. That sounds unreal, and we're gonna get into all that. But just kind of going back to the beginning of your route, you're talking about your time with Junior A, and then whilst in Junior A, you kind of got that scholarship to Clarkson, which you were excited about. Do you mind maybe sharing what's that process like, right? Because not everyone gets to go through that where they get, a high-end school kind of recruiting them. So how did that process go about? Was there multiple schools involved? What was that like?
Yeah, so first of all, my parents were huge in the process. Obviously driving me everywhere, every single game, practice and all that growing up. Can't thank them enough for all the stuff that they did for me through that. And what they're also big in was introducing me to NCAA because of all the, in my opinion, kind of crazy and not very smart rules that the NCAA has in terms of talking to athletes at a certain age. They were great at bringing me to schools and sort of getting my name out there. The OHL is big and shiny to every kid who's ever played hockey in Ontario. That's the first thing you see, your hometown team. And I was drafted to the OHL. I wasn't drafted. I think I was drafted in the 8th round, so nothing too high, but still on the radar.
For sure.
So when that happens, you get drafted at 16 or 15 and you go into your 16-year-old year. You kind of get put onto radar as well when you get drafted to NCAA schools. So what we were doing is we were contacting schools. My parents were really leading it. I also had a family advisor at the time, and I think I probably visited 5 or 6 schools before committing. My 16-year-old year, I tried to kind of go to as many schools as I could, as well as when I was 15. in weekends and time off, just whenever we could. And then I think it was near the end of my my first year juniors, I got my first scholarship to Clarkson, and Clarkson is a school that's it's 2.5 hours from Ottawa. It seemed like a great fit at the time. Still wasn't really sure what I wanted to do in terms of life after hockey. Still not really sure. I started a CBD company, so getting that on the way. But it's one of those things where in my mind I'm always just kind of keeping options open, and with the guidance of my parents, that definitely seemed like the best option in terms of keeping your options open, because I'd have that to fall back on. So because the schools couldn't contact us, like I said, we were going and visiting and talking to teams, seeing where I might fit in on teams. And then when Clarkson finally offered me a scholarship, I said yeah, and I was just happy with having a place to go. I knew what my next step was in hockey. And it was really exciting the day that I committed, for sure.
Yeah, no, for sure. And that process as a whole, right? Whether it's just, you're saying how, you get drafted to the OHL, then you kind of get on the radar, then you're trying to almost kind of play both sides, right? To have all options open, right? Where, that definitely must be an exciting time, but also maybe a little daunting, I guess you can say, right? Especially if, even most kids, right? You're coming out of high school, and let's say you're going straight into university, you need to pick a major, right? Maybe you're thinking about going juniors, but then they're like, oh no, I'm going to go the scholarship route. Okay, what's your major, right? So that's another big question. So that's for sure interesting. Was there anything more to that in regards to, you're mentioning the OHL? Was it really just, hey, keeps options open after hockey, or was it just, no, this is just a better fit, I have a better chance of playing as well?
It was tough for me to turn down the OHL, because, like I said, I grew up watching the Ottawa 67s. It was the I guess the Senators were great hockey too, but it was sort of closer to me. I would know a couple guys who would get drafted, and I was getting to that age where it was like, oh my god, I might get drafted to the OHL. And then when I did get drafted, I was drafted by the Plymouth Whalers, and it was Tyler Seguin's team at the time. So I was going into rookie camp, and Tyler Seguin was there, and he was supposed to be, he did go second overall, but he had that reputation coming in too. So it was a little bit of being starstruck at the same time. It's the first step of realizing, wow, this might be a career for me. I went into rookie camp, and I think I was like first or second top scoring defense in the rookie camp as an eighth rounder, and I turned some heads for sure. And they offered me a spot on the team as a 16-year-old, but it was very much like, we'll give you a shot. You might be the 6th, 7th defenseman. You might be jumping down between the junior B team and OHL, and it wasn't really enough for me to shut the door completely on the NCAA route. So I decided it's not going to hurt me to play 1 year of junior A and keep my eligibility open. There was definitely times where I thought that of switching, even when I was in college. It was, slumps happen and you have these options open. I went to Clarkson as a true freshman. So while I was in college, I was 18 years old for my first year, and I could have gone and played in the OHL for 2 years while I was at Clarkson, but I decided to stick to it through sort of the ups and downs of, it's just one of those things where in school you can't ask for a trade if, something's going wrong or anything like that. There's growing pains. Another big decision of mine to go and wait another year was I switched to being a defenseman the year before my OHL draft. I was a forward before that, and I just thought that, with the rule changes that had just come in about the hooking and clutching and grabbing and stuff, it might be better for me to be a defenseman. And, it worked out for sure, but I just wanted that extra couple of years to sort of develop. And I think it's shown that it's been beneficial to me for sure.
Yeah, for sure. And then one of those things I kind of want to touch on, because it's just like an interesting predicament in the sense of, let's say it's in regards to picking between an NCAA school or even like a junior team, right? Do you think, did you first off, or do you even think current players or stuff like that in that situation, do you think they look at, who's on the team, right? Let's say there's a top draft choice, or there's a top end recruit going to a specific school. Do you think the thought process is, hey, if they're there, I'm in the same camp on the same sheet of ice as them, I have a higher chance of kind of getting recruited because, scouts are not recruited, but drafted or seen by professional teams one day because, eyes are on this guy. And if more eyes that are coming to watch our team play, then I have a higher likelihood of, catching some scout's eye and maybe getting a contract from it one day.
Yeah, absolutely. There's that effect. I mean, there's so many different aspects of which you can weigh. I mean, I don't think either option is a bad option, and I don't necessarily think either option is the overall best option.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's very much whichever fits to your lifestyle and what you want better. I think it was like an 85, 86 average in high school. So, I was, school came fairly easily to me. Mm-hmm. So I went that route. Like I said, Tyler Seguin was on the OHL team, but at the same time, Plymouth was 10 or 12 hours away from home. And as a 16-year-old going away like that, that's a big decision versus Clarkson, which I could play junior A in literally a rink that's 15 minutes from my house versus going to play 12 hours away. Mm-hmm. Yeah, there is that top prospect thing for sure. But at the same time, having a top prospect on your team doesn't always mean that you'll get noticed, because if you're having a top prospect on your team, there's usually a couple more top prospects, and that might knock you down lower on the depth chart. So my rule of thumb was sort of, I guess, if it was a team like the London Knights that had drafted me, there's probably no doubt that I would have gone to the OHL. Just, a big team like that shows such a good turnover rate to go in pro. They're really just an incredible organization, really. But because it was so far, and also, in a foreign country at 16 years old, I wasn't prepared for that. Mm-hmm. But, I think that at this point, I think that when I was in school, the difference between the CHL and college was a lot bigger. Mm-hmm. I don't think that difference is as large now. There's a lot more guys going to play in NCAA than there used to be. And I think it's crazy what you see these young guys coming into now, what they can do. They can they can use a hockey stick like a lacrosse stick. Like, it doesn't make sense. I think there's top prospects everywhere now. And, I'm a true believer that if you're good enough and you work hard enough, you'll make it regardless. Obviously there's the injuries and you have to get a little bit lucky too, but put your head down and go to work and good things will happen for you.
For sure. And, I do want to touch on, your professional career and also your current position with the CBD company. But the one last question I have in regards to all of this is, you're talking about the difference between CHL and NCAA, right? Maybe 10 years ago, there's probably more significant difference where more of the top end talent was going, the junior route. But, more recently, right, especially in the drafts, you're seeing top end guys coming out of school. And I think, what was it? Was it on Canada Day maybe, where the NCAA changed the rules for athletes or student athletes? Do you think that's going to have a bigger shift where maybe in 2030 there's going to be better hockey talent coming out of the NCAA than there is in juniors?
I don't know if it's going to have as big of an effect in hockey as it will in basketball and football, because those are really the big money teams. Maybe the guys who are in North Dakota or Minnesota or those 5 or 6 super huge hockey schools that are always good. Those guys might have it. I think it'll definitely be interesting to see what happens in the NCAA. There's guys going to be making millions of dollars when they're freshmen. But in hockey, it'll definitely make it a little bit more attractive. Mm-hmm. I think for me, what was attractive was the how it was sure in college. I committed, and they said, if you sign this, guarantee if you get hurt or something happens, you have 4 years of paid education. Mm-hmm. Whereas the OHL is very much a next man up, and guys can go there and play 2-3 games and try, and they just get nervous and don't have a good 2-3 games, and then basically you cancel your eligibility for NCAA, and then you're left playing junior B, grinding as a 20-year-old, and then that route becomes a lot tougher to sort of get through than a clearer path. And for a situation like mine, that did happen to me. And this sort of transitions into why I started my CBD company as well. So I've through my career, I've had some pretty substantial injuries. So I'm close to 100 stitches. I've dislocated about, I think I have like 22 combined shoulder dislocations, thumb dislocations, a couple surgeries. I've broken about 10 or 12 bones, and I've had 2-3 concussions. But so when I was in college, I had a great freshman year. And I was getting looks from NHL teams, getting invited to camps, and then in the summer, I had a really unfortunate event where it was very much a wrong time, wrong place. I was going to my car actually on just a Tuesday night, and I got jumped with some kind of blunt object. I don't remember anything. Like basically 2-3 weeks of my life was a blur. But the result of that was I broke my shoulder. Resulted in the next 14 or 15, 16 dislocations. Like I would literally just like reach for something and like pop out like that. Broke 3 ribs, had my skull cracked. It was quite significant. And so that's why I redshirted 1 year and spent the whole year recovering from my injuries. I didn't even go back to school for the first semester. And so with that in college, looking back now, there's always the mindset of, oh, should I have gone this route? Should I have gone that route? But if you do that, it just kind of torments yourself. When you look back at it, though, and obviously hindsight is 2020. If this had happened while I was in the OHL, I'm not sure it would have been the same result, right? I would have possibly been, Tansey's hurt. We got to fill this roster position. Whereas at Clarkson, I was home for the first semester, and then I went back to Clarkson with the intention of playing the next season, and worked one-on-one with a trainer while the guys were on the ice. Like I built myself back up under them. I grew a great relationship with my trainer at the time that I worked with over those years. Jamie Rodriguez, helped me a crazy amount, basically get back to where I was. And it's one of those things that you got to weigh your options. In my opinion, NCAA is definitely a more safe route, but at the same time, it might not be the best route for everybody.
No, that makes sense, and definitely a crazy route you've had early on, and I'm sure still that you're going to fill us in on here, right? Where, man, like even just getting jumped, right? Like who's going to plan for that, right? And how that would affect your your decision for hockey, right? And thankfully you made the safer option, I guess you were calling it, but maybe it was the smarter option as well, right? Where it leads to more doors opening. And, kind of with that as well, you touched on your professional career off the top here a bit. Do you mind maybe taking us through that now, right? So let's say you finish your degree at Clarkson, or your 5 years at Clarkson. How did this come about now, right? With the ECHL and AHL teams, and then eventually European clubs.
Yeah. So, there's obviously growing pains, going through some stuff. I was like everybody is, just a new kid basically when it comes to pro hockey. And it's, I first signed my PTO with Binghamton, the Binghamton Senators. They're an American League team now. I think Binghamton is not the Senators anymore, but there's an American League team. I played 12 games, I think. And it was very much a little bit of shell shock for me, because in where I played college, my job was basically, I was 6'4", or 6'3", 6'4", something like 235, 240 pounds. And I was just a fridge that basically blocked shots and killed people and chipped pucks off the glass. And I was really good at that. Yeah. But at the American League level, that's just not enough. And I didn't realize that right away. So I went into Binghamton. I, posted 0 numbers. I think I had 1 fight in 12 games, and I was like -1 or -2. No numbers all across the board. And in my mind, that was good. But in reality of it, there's a ton of good hockey players out there, and you've got to fill those spots with good hockey players who can make plays. And at that moment at the American League level, I was not that type of player. So that was evident that I needed some time to grow. And you're young, and I had been to NHL camps pretty much every single off season, and in my mind I was thinking a little bit like, oh, screw this, screw that. I'm better than this, better than that. But it wasn't until I went down to the East Coast Hockey League, my actual first year pro, that I really got woken up, I guess. As in, like there's a lot of good hockey players out there. It's a very, very small sample size that make it to pro. And then after that, you got to, fight tooth and nail to get through. So how I started after Binghamton is I signed just a contract with the Kansas City Mavericks in the East Coast Hockey League. But with that, I got an invite to the St. Louis Blues camp. And I was definitely a little bit fortunate in terms of the St. Louis Blues camp. I think I worked hard for that camp, but in terms of getting the playing time, it was the same year that the World Cup was, or whatever they called it, that year that they had Team North America. It was that same year. So they had Parayko, Pietrangelo, and Gunnarsson. There might have even been one more defense who were, on the St. Louis Blues that weren't there for the first 4 or 5 weeks of camp. Mm-hmm. So I came in there and, I had a bee in my bonnet, and I was a little upset that I was going in there with just an East Coast contract. So I was trying to prove a point, and I ended up playing very well. Actually made it through the first 2 cuts of camp, got to play in, an exhibition game, 2 exhibition games, one in Chicago on a Saturday night, which was definitely one of the coolest things of my hockey career. I got to play against Patrick Kane, Artemi Panarin, played against Seabrook, Jordan Tutu, Corey Crawford. Like they had almost a loaded lineup. And then from that camp, I was able to get a 2-way contract with the Chicago Wolves, so their American League team. Mm-hmm. I stayed up for the first 15 or 20 games, and then, I got sent down. And from there, obviously, again, a little bit bitter, but I hadn't realized that I needed to make plays. I needed to become a better player. So I got sent down to the coast where I was starting at the American League level and dropped down. So obviously it was a little bit lower of a level. And I came in and really was a good player in my first year in the coast. Made the All-Star team as a rookie. And then from there, that season wrapped up. I was sort of a yo-yo up and down after that. And then I played 2 years in Toledo, which is just the most insane place to play minor league hockey. It's on a Tuesday night. You have 9,000 fans. The Toledo Walla it's the most electric place to play minor league hockey, in my opinion. It's really incredible. And I had a lot of fun there. A lot of good guys. We, played my first year. It was a okay year. Had a couple call-ups to the American League, and then my second year in Toledo, third year pro, I got a call up to Stockton for about 3 months, and I started there. I was I was really hot in Toledo. I had 4 points in 4 games, and really was I was playing 6 defenseman minutes, had 4 points in 4 games, and then I was 25 at the time, and sort of kind of at the age where, you're not really a prospect anymore. You're kind of becoming an old guy. And then my 5th game, I didn't get a point. And the 6th game I get scratched, 7th game got scratched, 8th game got scratched. And I was like, okay, like, what do I got to do here to stay in? Mm-hmm. And so, I got in, got out, and got sent back to Toledo. That's when I really decided to go to Europe, because at that point I was like, okay, you know what? Like it's a grind. You play 72 games, especially in the coast, you have to bus a lot. The travel isn't exactly great in some areas, sometimes of the season. So that's when I was sort of, realizing, all right, might be time to go to Europe. And in terms of my hockey career, I think that's, one of the best decisions I've made. It's really been awesome just living in different cities and, playing 50 games instead of 72. It's better on the body. You just get to live in Europe, right? Like I lived in Innsbruck, Austria, in the Austrian Alps this past year. Like I woke up every single morning and stared at mountains. It was incredible. Mm-hmm. And you just don't get that in most places in North America. So the trade is, there's definitely things that are better in each place, but I'm ultimately very happy with the decision to go overseas after a few years in North America.
Yeah, for sure. I can only imagine, right? Just in regards to like even like putting hockey aside, just in regards to like life and experiencing, making the most of those chances. That's definitely something that's worthwhile because that's something I hope to do. Right? I have this business here, and hopefully we can continue growing. Where one day I can kind of just go. It's all remote now, thankfully, because of COVID. Or thankfully, I don't know if I can say that, but but you know what I mean, right? You got used to the process of being remote, where hey, maybe one day I can just go to Europe, right, for 2 months and make connections there as well, where that's what you get to do for a career, which is amazing. And you kind of touched on it in the beginning, but we never really dived into it. So how did the CBD company come about, right? How did you get involved? How is it going?
Yeah, so my CBD company, well, our CBD company, and with my partner Brett, he's been working in the CBD industry for about 3 or 4 years now,
Mm-hmm.
and I was working with him in a capacity that I was, posting Tansey 20 on my Instagram, and people would use the discount code, and they, send me a couple of free CBD things here and there. And then it kind of dried up for a little bit. And I was wondering, I texted Brett and I said, like, what's going on here? And he told me that his partner basically thought that it was a get rich quick scheme, thought they were going to be millionaires after, 6 months, which it really isn't. Nothing is unless if you win the lottery.
Yeah.
But he said that his partner just kind of bailed, didn't have the money for it. And I said, well, check it out. Like, I've got this idea. I've got some extra money here. Let's attack it a little bit different of a way. So obviously this started March of last year. So it's been about a year and a half that we've been going on this. And I was going into my 5th year pro, and with my experience for surgeries and injuries and all that kind of stuff, I had really seen and had been given a couple of opioid things and stuff that they sort of they definitely numb the pain, but you don't feel anything.
Mm-hmm.
You don't, and they don't really tell you as much what the long-term effects might be.
Mm-hmm.
There's not as much of an education out there. And through my career, I had seen guys fall victim to it, getting prescribed stuff like, just all these opioids that people fall addicted to, and they definitely lead to harm in your life future on, because they'll give you a 30-day dose and then they just cut you off, and you're just kind of like, this stuff is addictive. So I said, let's go after athletes. Everybody in the CBD market seemed to be, casting that huge net and not really catching anybody. And the way we looked at it is, we'll just, we'll go after athletes. Obviously, through my career, I've learned to become, or I've become friends with a lot of different athletes from different sports. And I was contacting these guys and seeing what they wanted to do and how they like to attack it. So we wanted to attack athletes and basically push the opioid epidemic. And with that, we wanted to sort of, I'm very aware that opioids do have a place in the world. There's some injuries where, it's necessary to have these things that, might have problems down the road, but injuries do need something to help at some times. But for us, what we're really pushing is having the option of having the natural, and cleaner and non-addictive way to recover, which is CBD. And the thing that's been tough is working through that gray area, right? Because there's some teams that you talk to and they're like, yeah, absolutely, that's awesome, we love CBD. And then there's some teams who are like, absolutely not, that's weed, it's bad. And so it's interesting seeing that. But as it's switching now, there's more science involved in the recovery and the anti-inflammatory properties of CBD and just marijuana in general. I think athletes need to have that healthy alternative. Like even this week, seeing the American Olympian sprinter who can't, she can't compete in the Olympics because she smoked a joint. Like that bugs me so much. It's really makes my skin crawl that there's people out there who, these people aren't necessarily athletes. They may have been at some point in their life, but they're not. There are people who are deciding what the world's top athletes can put in their body, which doesn't make sense to me. I don't understand that. It's just not logical. If you're a top athlete in the world, you're obviously very aware of what you're putting in your body and what you like. Everyone has their own vessel, which is their body, and what works for me might not work for you. And, everybody else in the world, everyone finds their recipe for success. And we're trying to make a healthier alternative part of that recipe for athletes everywhere, because, there's science behind anti-inflammatory properties in the marijuana plant. And it's evolving every single day. You hear different good things coming out of it. And there's also the science behind all the addictive properties that opioids have as well. And I guess I really don't understand why the science of good things from the marijuana plant and bad things from all these opioids that you can have, we know that they can lead to addictions. We've read books of guys who, have been prescribed these things and get cut off, and, they turn to cocaine, they turn to all kinds of different addictive drugs that just numb you. But there's just seems to be a very slow movement towards it, which I think it's flabbergasting that it's, but anyways, that's, that I can go on a rant for that. But yeah, it's, that's essentially what our whole target was, right? Is to just give athletes a natural way to recover, the option of a natural way to recover,
Yeah. No, that's huge. And no, I was enjoying, I was very interested in that, right? Where that's what the podcast is about. That's what makes it interesting, right? When someone tunes in, it's not always going to be, oh, I went to school, I was an intern, and 1, 2, 3, now I'm a director, right? That's the interesting part of it, right? Where there's, dips, turns, slumps, as some are, and then also just, revelations, right? With, earlier you're kind of touching on how, you're kind of going through the list of your injuries, right? 22, with shoulder and fingers and the concussions, all the different sort of things like that. And I don't know if I can say this per se, but maybe that kind of led to where it is now, where you're injured so much and you had so many different types of recovery that it kind of led to the CBD business. You're like, hey, like, this needs to change, right? And that's maybe why you're so passionate about it, right? Because you were in those situations, right? So it's part of your route. That's what makes it so interesting. But yeah.
So, and basically that's how I became to it, right? It was my first year pro in Chicago. I had a friend or a teammate, Scooter Vaughn, who he had kind of introduced me to CBD. Like, I'd smoked joints before, obviously, but like I had never really used it in a medical way, I guess. It was more like, okay, it's Saturday night, I'm gonna smoke a joint with some friends. Whereas he introduced me in a way where it was cream and stuff to help with anxiety and stuff to help with, all the good things, the good properties that they have. And it was also sort of one of those things where I wanted to get going, get my feet wet into life after hockey as well. I didn't think that our company would have kind of exploded the way it has this early. But it really was a thing where I wanted to sort of adjust myself back into the working world, because, I usually come home and I'll, get a bartending job or work as a hockey school, just sort of, make a few $1,000s for the summer just to keep me afloat. But I really hadn't been in the business world since I started playing hockey, since I graduated. And it's interesting to see the growing pains, right? There's some times where I quite frankly, I'm a little bit lost, to be honest with you, but it's one of those things where it's important to refresh yourself and set yourself up, because the reality is that, I probably won't be able to play hockey past 35 or 40, just in terms of, your body, unless Jaromir Jagr still playing at, 74 probably. But yeah, like it's, you have to set yourself up. You have to give yourself an opportunity to grow. And I wanted to do that while I was still playing. So I wasn't just going to be completely shell shocked, when I retired, and just be like, okay, like, how do I use Microsoft Excel? What's an email type thing, And it has been tough at sometimes, but definitely ultimately beneficial.
For sure. And one of the things you mentioned there that kind of like struck a chord with me, right, is, I started a business as well, White Whale Marketing. I got a quick plug, but the thing that you said was so interesting, right, is, and even kind of going back to the initial founder, right, we were saying where he thought it was a quick, get rich scheme, right, and it didn't happen. And he's like, oh, I'm out, right? And I find that's one of the things where even myself, right, where, I took a few months creating a business plan, kind of planning it out and kind of having a strategy about it. And I thought I was pretty like even keel about what my targets were and different things like that. But, there's ups and downs and everything, right? And then there's definitely times you hit a wall and you're like, oh man, I don't know what to do, right? Like you're like, do I pivot? Do I just like continue pushing? And I mean, that's the kind of the interesting side of business, right? Where sometimes you don't know how much longer you got to go at a certain process before it strikes a chord and, you guys start, hitting your stride. Or sometimes, you think you know what you're doing, but you're kind of just learning as you go. And in 2 years, you're like, oh, I had no idea what I was doing then, right? So I definitely find
no idea what we're doing ever, really.
Yeah.
Always trying to survive.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. And like, to be honest, even maybe you can touch on this as well. And I'm sure a lot of the people listening are probably, current students at the end of their academic career, or just got out under 30, I'd say. And I don't know if people listening can connect to this, but, I was always in the mindset of, okay, I'm going to go to school, go to, business school, etc., get a degree, get a good job. And because I have the degree, I'm going to know everything and I'm going to get this job. And, I'm going to be a smart guy. I'm going to climb through the ranks, etc. But what I found was, even though I enjoyed my degree and I'm sure I learned a lot of great stuff, once I actually got to marketing jobs after, school, there was a lot of learning, right? Whereas, hey, everything you learn in school isn't necessarily applicable, right? A lot of it's kind of, hey, figure it out. And I was trying to get into sports at the time as well, right? Where a lot of the times they're like, hey, Chris, figure it out. That's all it really was, right? Where I think a lot of what it is, whether it's business or even life, it's just learning as you go, right? No one really knows everything, but you'll gain that knowledge as you go.
Absolutely. I mean, for me, so I went to Clarkson, obviously, like I said.
Mm-hmm.
When I committed to Clarkson, I was 16. I was young. I committed entirely because of hockey.
Mm-hmm.
Entirely. I didn't even read anything about the school, basically. It was an engineering school, not a math guy. I don't know if I could pass the 9th grade math class right now. I changed majors, I think 7 times.
Wow.
Including my last change of major was a week before I graduated because there was a class called econometrics, which is just, in my mind, the most outrageous class in the world. But it's basically like this happens in the market and there's this little dot on this, thing that changes within like 0.00000001. And I just couldn't figure it out. And, I took the class twice and there's some classes that I just breezed by. I didn't have to study. This class I was going to tutors like 3 times a week. And I think the best I got on an exam was like 36%.
Wow.
And so I had to just drop it because I was like, I'm not going to graduate. Yeah. So I dropped it. And then with my credits, I just got a liberal arts degree. And basically in my mind, short of, you being a brain surgeon or, a medical doctor or something, just having that piece of paper just shows that you have figured out how to, accomplish something. You've worked through something and you've accomplished it. And I think that's really the big thing, unless it's obviously a specific job like that where you really need to be hands-on and learn, I don't want the guy who's doing my shoulder surgery to be a liberal arts major for sure. But, it's really just figuring out problems for the most part.
No, and what you're just saying there about, specific degrees or majors, I completely agree with you where, obviously I also went to school, so take that with a grain of salt where I can't be like, hey, don't go to college or university because obviously I did. But yeah. I agree, unless you're like a lawyer, doctor, engineer, I think, yes, you need those what you learned in school is probably directly transferable to a job, but I find business, probably every other degree as well, a lot of it you can learn on the job. But I think what school is good for is it gets you in that creative problem solving mindset, right? Where you have to go through all these calculus, statistics, analytics classes where it makes you kind of think, analytically, right? Where, hey, you got to get used to numbers or figuring out, missing variables, different stuff like that. Where I know probably the biggest thing that I've noticed since when I started school way back and then kind of ended it was my thought process, or even like my maturity, right? Where you kind of mature and understand, okay, this is how things run, 1, 2, 3. And like you said, you're showing that you can complete something, right? Where, people know if you were in school, you had a tough exam, you had a tough prof, you had that course that you couldn't just cruise through, right? So it's also just kind of showing that you kind of went through the rigors, right? And you can kind of get through it, right? Where it's an accomplishment of its own just to finish. And kind of building on that and kind of maybe ending the podcast a bit here. Before I kind of get into the questions that I like to ask at the end, which are pretty broad, do you remember what your 7 major changes were?
Okay, so I went in, like, I was 7 majors, including a couple of double majors in there, just because I was like, why not?
Yeah.
I started in business and psychology, and then about a month in, I thought that psychology was just way too, like, it was just so much memory work, and I just didn't want to do it. So I dropped to just business. So that was my first change to my second major. Then I went back to, then I just went for communications. And then from communications, I think I went to business and communications for a double major.
Okay.
And then, so I was in the business sector, had supply chain management, entrepreneurship, and finance. I started in supply chain, and then I switched to entrepreneurship. So I was entrepreneur and communications for my fourth change. And then I went just to business again. And then I went back. I went to communications, and then I went back to business. And then it was the econometrics class that really threw me a loop in my last 2 years. I was like, no, I'm not doing this. So I just got the Bachelor of Arts degree, and I was like, all right, I'm out. Time to go play some sports.
Yeah. No, that's wild, right? You must have been changing almost every semester, right? Where the academic officer, like, hey, Kevin, welcome.
Yeah, my academic officer. Okay, nice to see you again. Has it been a semester? Okay.
Yeah. No, that's good stuff. And there's kind of 2 questions I like to ask at the end. They're kind of pretty broad. The first one is, let's say you're 103, right? That's the go-to age in my head, because I think I'm living to 103. And you're in Rocky, you're just cruising, right? And you're looking back and you're just thinking about your career, right? What's a moment in your career, or route, I should say, shout out the route, that kind of sticks out to you where you're like, wow, I can't believe I got to live that? Whether it's, living in Innsbruck and, seeing the mountains, or a specific team or tournament or playoff run you guys were on, or maybe it was even with a business or school. What moment in time do you think so far in your life it's going to stick out to you when you're 103?
I don't know if I could just cut that down to one. I can definitely think of 3 good ones. One is just being able to experience Europe. It's really a privilege to be able to, I've been able to, I think it's visit like close to 15 countries now, mostly through hockey. I've scored a professional goal in 5 different countries. I personally think that's pretty awesome. And, I haven't scored one in Slovakia yet, so it'll be 6. And then a second one would be playing in Toledo. We made it to the finals one year, and it incredible. We didn't win in the finals, unfortunately, but we had it rivaled any sports game ever in terms of fans. Obviously, it was only 9,000 because that's what the building could hold. But when we came down, we were down 2-0 in the series and came back to Toledo, and we were up. I think it was 3-2 with 4 or 5 minutes left. it was absolutely deafening. It was a complete whiteout, and I couldn't, like, if there was someone sitting right here, I could talk to them and I'd have to scream at them because they wouldn't hear me. It was just surreal. Like there was nothing better. There was no better one-time experience in terms of sport in my life. And then the third would be just a little bit of a shell shock, starstruck moment was my first year pro. Like I said, I played in Chicago. I had a 2-on-2. My D partner was Joel Edmondson. And the 2-on-2 that I was against was Panarin and Kane.
Oh, wow.
And so Eddie drove Kane to the corner on his backhand. Like he was basically on the goal line on his backhand. And I had Panarin, within a stick length of me. And Kane just turns around and throws a backhand sauce. And like I said, Panarin is right in front of me. Like I got him. The puck lands like this far from his stick, and he just steps into a one-timer, and it goes bar down. And I just turned and I looked. I'm like, there was nothing that I could do here. Like short of tap this guy, that was my one experience of, oh my God, like this is how good these guys are. Mm-hmm. Like we were both in these guys' faces, perfect gap, wasn't good enough. Like wasn't good enough. So I would say that those three moments, just very much different capacities, are, some of the highlights. It's weird to say that a goal against in an exhibition game is a highlight of my career, but just a really cool time where I saw something, I was a part of something that was just amazing, like just amazing sports moment. Like it was cool for sure.
For sure. No, and do you still have that St. Louis jersey? Were you able to keep it?
I actually wasn't, because they don't let you keep camp jerseys. Okay. Unfortunately, but I do have pro jerseys.
Even the preseason jersey, no?
No, yeah, they don't. No, it wasn't like it was my first year pro. I didn't know that was a thing, so I didn't really ask. But no, unfortunately, I don't.
Fair enough. That's still what a moment, right? Playing against Kane and Panarin, sharing ice with them, and even Edmondson, right, in the finals now. So
yeah, for sure.
Very cool. And then the last question I have is, let's say we're kind of go back in time, speak to a young Kevin, or even if you were to maybe walk into Clarkson or Ottawa, and speak to a group of, what is it, first year, I think 18-year-old, something like that. What advice? Let's go one advice for career and one advice for life. What would you say? Whether it's a young Kevin or a student now.
Definitely be patient with yourself. I mean, obviously through the injuries I've had, the growing pains I've had, the surgeries, the stitches, the ups and downs of your career. You have times in your career where I've had times in my career where I quite frankly just wanted to hang him up. I just said, enough's enough, whatever. I'll just go get a real job. Just super pissed off. Like it's I've really learned over time that it's really a part of the journey rather than just a means to an end. I every single game I would look back and be like, why am I not in the NHL yet? Why am I not in the NHL yet? Rather than looking at myself and being like, I'm not in the NHL, but I'm extremely privileged to be able to play a sport for a living. I mean, short of the CBD company, I really haven't had like a real job in my life that I've had to, take care of before this past year and a half. Like obviously I'm not saying that bartending or anything like that was a real job, but for me, it wasn't, because the way I was working is I would work one shift every week. Like it wasn't like I had a job. I just, I had a friend who was a manager who would let me come bartend. It wasn't anything I got held accountable for. So being patient with yourself and also being forgiven. I look back at some of the things that I regret over my career, some of the decisions I've made. And I've definitely made some bad decisions over my career. Everybody does. But there were a lot of times where I really guilted myself into that, and it just led me into a downward spiral a little bit. And, instead of, some good verbiage that I like to go towards now. And I try to remind myself, I still feel bad sometimes. I still feel guilty sometimes about bad decisions, but I can catch myself and forgive myself. And the way I try to look at things now is, instead of saying, today I have to work out. I have to do this. I have to do that. The way I try to look at it is today I get to do this. I get to work out. I get to go skate, even because days aren't always fun. It's not always fun going to practice 5 days in a row and, blocking a shot. Like, you love winning, you love playing a sport, but there are definitely some bad things that happen over your career. That's just, there's nothing you can do about that. That's just life. Not every day is supposed to be a terrific day. And so definitely being more forgiving to myself in my career and in my life has been something that's definitely helped me change for the better.
Yeah, no, that's great advice. I'm even going to take away myself, because I'm sure, even just with, starting a business or working a business, or even probably in hockey, right, where oftentimes I find people are probably the hardest on themselves than anyone else can be, right? So you're like, hey, like, why aren't you working out more? Why aren't you being more productive with the business? Different things like that. And it's almost, I was reading this book and it was just saying how that like puts you in a negative sense when you're trying to say you're not doing enough, right?
Yeah.
Rather than just acknowledging, hey, I'm not doing enough today. And, that's okay, because I know that I'm not, and tomorrow I will, right? And that's almost the better thing when you just say out loud that, hey, like, it's being forgiving, what you're saying, right? Okay, I understand I'm not skating, or I'm not, doing enough for work today, but, tomorrow will be better, right? So that's definitely some great advice. I think a young Kevin, a current Chris, and, future students will also take away that they'll write down in their notebook. So that was fantastic. Unless there's anything else you'd like to share, it's 51 minutes. Time's flown by, at least for me. And this was amazing. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you very much. I think I've covered just about everything. It's just, like I said, being patient, being forgiving, keep working hard is the ultimate thing. Work hard, be punctual, and just be a nice person. Those are kind of like things that I've just kind of tried to do over the last few years more intentively, and it's led to more success for sure. And now I'm on podcasts like this, doing pretty cool things, and I just thank you for bringing me on. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no, for sure, anytime. And I love chatting with you. And the last thing I will say is, when I started this podcast, it was just kind of grow my network, meet with people beyond Ottawa, or even people like you in Ottawa or close by. And I was always thinking, when interviewing all these people from all these different backgrounds, to get some crazy advice at the end for myself and the listeners to kind of take away with. But I think the most constant advice that everyone's giving, and clearly if so many people say it, you got to take it to heart, and it's just, everyone says just be a nice person, because I guess people aren't nice.
Long way.
Right? So it's crazy how far, like how long just being genuine, or just being where you should be, right? Just be nice. And they say how far it can go. So that's definitely cool. But thank you for coming on, and hopefully we'll chat again soon.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you very much, and best of luck with all this.
Yeah, thank you.